Welcome back to the new norm. I'm Dr. Lou Graham. I'm going to be joined again with Gary Kadi. This program is brought to you by Midway Dental and Catapult Education. With Gary on episode 2, we were talking about 5 factors of getting really back into what we want to do, be dentists, or 5 buckets as Gary would call it. We talked about safety first. Now we're going to get right into solvency. Gary, let's talk solvency. You take it from there and I'll ask questions. Go.
If your money ain't right, you can't join the fight, Lou. If your money ain't right, you can't join the fight for health. And what happens is dentists are used to paying themselves last. Not in my house, Lou. They get paid first, Lou. And since they've been able to etch a sketch,
Yes.
for the baby boomers, you know what that is from my millennials back
Yes.
in the dinosaur days. You are blank slating. This is a blank slate. You get to reinvent. I have doctors, and I walk them through what I'm about to share, and they're going to be more profitable working May through December than they would if they were working the full time. And that just rests their mind, Lou, because they're sitting there and they're going, yes, because now you have to relook at every expense. And I want to bring up the 3 types of expenses in solvency. Very important.
Okay.
Destructive, Lou, consumptive, and productive. Destructive is, as you know, I revealed that I'm an alcoholic. If I buy a $20 bottle of wine, it's not the $20 bottle of wine. I lose my wife. I lose my son. I lose my personal confidence.
Right.
I go right into guilt and shame, and everything that I've worked for is dead. So you could look at that as a $20 expense, just like the Debbie Downer in your dental practice. You know what I'm talking about, Lou, the Debbie Downer?
Of course. Thanks so much.
Oh, no, not you. You're the Brian Bummer. You are, if it's a guy, it's Brian Bummer. If it's a gal, it's Debbie Downer, right?
Yep.
Here's the deal. I couldn't figure out why we had this. The reason why we have this is because every dental office has the bad apple. And here's what we learned. Because the team actually complains about him or her, and they actually want them there because that sets the bar on safety for their jobs being safe. And that is a very counterintuitive distinction that I learned, but it's the biggest destructive cost for a dental practice. So in our next episode, we're going to talk about restarting and who you should bring back, how to bring them back, what to do about that. But I want to really bring this into destructive expense. The next thing I want to look at is consumptive.
Let's talk destructive. Go.
Destructive is your Debbie Downer or Brian Bummer that you think you can't get rid of or fire. And now all of a sudden, that all boats rise the minute you ping that Debbie Downer or Brian Bummer. And if it's a dentist like you and you're the Brian Bummer, you got to wake up. And so that's a destructive expense. A consumptive expense is like, if you like go on vacation and you might get rejuvenated, but you don't get $1 spent for $1 returned. You might get rejuvenated, but it doesn't have dollar for dollar return. Productive expense. What we're doing is having dentists go through every line item in their checkbook, every line item in their personal, every line item on their credit card. Now, here's the thing. They're like stepping over dollars to get to pennies because nobody ever taught them about these 3 things. That's why they nickel and dime cotton rolls, and that's not what you want to do. What you want to do is you want to build your top line, and then you have your expenses. See, people are, my dad used to drive 10 miles to save a 0.9% on gas. Meanwhile, it costs them more to drive there.
Right.
And that's what dentists I found have been doing in the past. They get caught and they think every expense is a cost to them, but it's not. How do you turn every cost into a productive expense? Number 1. Number 2, coming back. So how do you pay yourself first, Lou? Let's start unpacking this, okay? You ready?
Mm-hmm. Ready.
All right, cool. In month 1, you do 50% of your capacity. So if last year you did 100,000 and you're coming back in, let's say, I'm going to say June, you do 50,000 because you want to cut your patient flow by half so that you can honor social distancing. We still don't have regulations yet.
Right.
But we can assume that, they're asking restaurants to go to a third. So we're going to say we're going to go to half. I know dentistry is not going to have that kind of regulation, or I shouldn't say that. We're anticipating doing half revenue. Or I have some aggressive doctors that are doubling their hours. I don't recommend that because your costs go up. What I'd like you to do is do 50% in June, 75% in July, 100% in August through December. So do you follow that first, Lou? I want to make sure that that's locked in.
Okay.
Right? And the why is because we have to work out the new systems. You're going to stumble, you're going to fumble,
Agreed.
but if there's no space to make up for stuff and clean stuff up, and you're packed, first of all, it's not honoring the safety thing that you promised people, but also the new systems and processes. This is also why in the next episode, if you bring back defiant team members, the Debbie or the Brians of the world, and you don't get straight with them, and you had a problem with implementation before, you're having to implement probably 50 to 60 new types of systems to accommodate the new, rules and the new norms as you're talking about, Lou. So that sets that up. You ready so far? You got me?
So far.
Good. Next. Now you pay yourself first. So we're going to have you take 35% of that revenue. Now, if you got your PPP and you're down with me, because you're down with me. I like that Naughty by Nature song. It's like down with
Go
OPP.
on.
Yeah, you know me.
Stay focused.
All right. Listen, we got to keep people engaged though too. Listen, the PPP, Lou, is we got to have. If you get your PPP, then you can do it off of your 100%, which is going to be in August. If you didn't get your PPP, you got to manage cash is king, and you got to reduce down who you bring back. So you're going to bring back people in a gradient process. And what I found is, and this is very interesting, the universe always supports things. Some people don't want to come back right away. So that's okay. That's why in the next segment, we're going to talk about interviewing everybody. Because if you're at 50%, you might bring back 50% of your overhead. And the percentages are like this. 35%, right? 35%, 35 to 40% profit, and then 60 to 65% overhead. So you take what you're going to do gross, and then you're going to take 25%, and let's say you want to do 65% overhead, then another 40% for your expenses. So that's your 65, and then you're going to profit 35. That's how you pay yourself first. And doctors their minds are blown because they've always just took what was left over, which was not enough, right?
Right. So, Gary, let me just ask you this. So let's just go back to the 50% for month one. For month one, which I think is very, very, very doable. And I want everybody, you know what, we're gonna pause, and now we're really gonna dive into this, because this is a key point, Gary. If you're gonna go and your goal is to do, if you were doing 100,000 and now it's 50,000, I don't think, Gary, openly you can double your hours, because with all the new regulations, wearing an N95, if that is the way we're gonna go, or a KN, you can't work 10 and 12 hours. I worked yesterday 6 hours. I was exhausted. But let's talk about this 50%. I agree with you. I think if you're going to bring senior citizens in first, like we talked about last episode, because obviously they are the ones most at risk. Your office is crystal clean. I agree with you. But I'll say this, and I know we're both believers in this, like yesterday, between a cone beam scan on 3 or 4 of my emergencies yesterday, and immediately getting deep into what kind of work they needed, it also customizes your pathway very straightforward. There's no guessing. And I think doing 50% of dentistry, adding a little bit more time for each procedure, I really think it's really doable. And I love the idea of 75% the next month, because it's going to take you 30 days to figure out how to maneuver through your office and your patients to really start increasing your productivity to get to the 75% level. Is that where you're kind of going?
Yeah, it's brilliant, Lou, and I love that you bring the on-the-court experience from the doctor in the office perspective. My job is to listen to what doctors and team members are saying that are already back, and then I codify. That's my stupid human trick. I codify a systematic, simple process. But I have 4 criteria for every process we put in, and I call it the past. It needs to be predictable. It needs to be aligned to the doctor's values. It needs to be simple, and it needs to be team driven.
Yeah.
Now, you're going to fumble and stumble in those 4 areas, right?
Yeah.
And then, like, I'll give you an example. People may have objections to money because their cash flow is whacked. Well, you need to have your treatment coordinator trained on how to fit the treatment into the lifestyle. Take a $5,000 case, break it out to $200 a piece, and now we're doing what the auto industry is doing, which is spreading out the payments.
Yep.
You still get the revenue, but you're helping the patient. That is going to be more needed than ever. And in the past, you might have had care credit as like a passive thing. It's going to be a very active thing for the right procedures and the right practice.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. We had Bruce Baird on with Compassionate Finance, and he and I both really agree. I think financing our patients is really, they've lost their jobs, they've lost income, they're coming back, and if they're going to need dentistry, you better have all these systems in place because it's stressful enough with all the PPE. And this is part of, I think, getting prepared as an office, how you're going to be able to give a $5,000 legitimate treatment plan, and someone's going to need 2 or 3 years to pay you off. But that's okay because you're making money, you're doing good income, and you're doing the right thing for patients.
Yeah, there's no doubt, and there's new needs. Like here's the other thing to be aware of: the patient. There's a new patient. They're being trained on asymptomatic. My son used it at breakfast. He goes, "Oh, he's just asymptomatic." My 15-year-old son, Lou, he knows what asymptomatic is. So we can now speak because 90% of the treatment that happens in a dental office is asymptomatic.
Yeah.
But here's the problem. The dentist was trained to find the chief complaint and fix it. And this is the biggest solvency problem. Finding the chief complaint begets this old bureaucracy to happen, which is you present the case and you're asking the patient, is there anything hurting, anything bothering you? Why did you come in? You gave all your power away. You're not an advisor anymore. They're advising you because you're asking and training them on symptomatic care. This is asymptomatic care. When you have a healthy mouth baseline as a tool, changes your solvency incredibly, and that's for another time, but I just wanted to put that in here because I think it's really relevant, right? So getting back to what we were talking about, Lou, is really reverse engineering the dentist first, then reverse engineering the team, because your biggest expense, how to turn your payroll into a profit center, is outlined in my first book. And actually, I did an overview in the book that's coming out, the 8th edition, $1 Million Dentistry, Bounce Back from Anything. And it really describes how to reverse engineer the team. Like if you want to do, like if your goal is $1 million from June through December, then you know that's the 7 months, and you reverse engineer how much you need to do per month, per day, and then, but you do it in a gradient in the early months, so you're not overwhelming yourself, by person, by day. So now, if you have to do 7,000 a day, that appointment coordinator is responsible for the outcome of the doctor's schedule at 7,000, and the hygienist at 1,500. By the way, hygienists, we call them hygienists. You know, the old bloody prophy, the old polishers are done. It's time to graduate because, as you know, we believe in complete health dentistry, and if you don't graduate from the drill, fill, and PPO mill to a complete health dental practice where you connect the mouth and the body, another solvency problem, because you're not going to be able to do enough transactional crowns and one surface fillings in the new world where you have to do larger cases. And how you get to larger cases is people understanding the value of what you're actually providing and why they should do something more than your insurance. Where that all began was a professor who trained you to find the chief complaint. You're a young guy, Lou, right? You're in your 40s. You know, when you're a young guy, right? And you're in your 40s. Didn't your professor say to find the chief complaint and fix it, Lou? Come on.
Of course. No. Right? That's how we were taught. Yep.
Right. And guess what happens? Your brain says, what do I ask the patient if that's what I'm trained? Why are you here? Does anything hurt you? Is anything bothering you? Symptomatic investigator. Problem with that, 90% of dentistry is asymptomatic. They think you're trying to buy your next Porsche in their mouth because you're now giving them asymptomatic solutions to problems they don't know they have. That's the problem. That's the source of solvency everywhere in dentistry. That's why we can increase. Maya Bashore in DC area went from 6 days a week to 2.2, $1.1 million in a 12-month period Now she could be with her daughter because she went inside her practice and increased her case acceptance, increased her retention, and took care of her team in a new way. And now she has a happy team that implements sustainable results.
So with that, that's how we'll end episode 3, and we'll do one more with you in just a little brief while. And I'm going to say this, and to sum up what Gary was saying, we're not trying to oversell dentistry, not at all. That is absolutely not how Gary believes. Gary believes in total health. But I think the key number that I always go back to, and really it's what Gary just closed on, only 22% of all the dentistry diagnosed in the United States, only 22% is begun in treatment within a year. So what that means is we're really bad communicators. And if we can start taking our communication to the next level and converting this to the treatment, much of which is asymptomatic, to get mouths healthy again, I think that's what Gary really has been touching upon in this episode. Stay safe, be smart. We'll see you soon. So let me be clear. We want to hear from you. We want to hear your questions. So what we want you to do is we want you to go to education@midwaydental.com. Shoot us your questions. We'll go right to the experts. I know I'm not the expert, so let's go ask the experts what we should be doing as our next step next week, the week after, and thereafter. I look forward to hearing from you.